podcast. I think that's the first thing I should say. It's a honor to have you here, and I'm very happy. I have to confess something. Back in the days, I mean I we not we I mean we met just a few minutes ago, but I knew you. I mean physically because I watched the Rio making of,
Yes.
and I was doing bursts back in the days, and you show up in some of these sequences where you showed a little bit of the main character, and I was trying to okay how she did it, and I remember you because that I watched that part of the making of a few times, so
That's
was
so funny. Well, like actually, that's funny because that interview, I know exactly which one you're talking about, and I a lot of people were like contacting me about it because it was actually quite long, and there was a lot of stuff in there and showing off how our rig worked, which I think was the jewel or blue one from our birds, right?
yes.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, thanks so much for having me here too. It's really great, and I'm super excited to talk to you today.
Thanks to you. It's, uh, it's super great. So okay, so the first questions where I mean how do you end up being like character TD, or I would say like character specialist technique? I don't know how to put you like a tag because you did a lot of stuff and you I mean different roles, and it's how sometimes it's very hard to tag the people with only one role. But how do you end up doing what you do?
Yeah. So, and you tell me if I'm going back too far, but basically the way it started out was for just so everybody who's listening to that knows that I grew up in Germany,
Hmm.
and at that time there was really I mean, we had, of course, schools, but like for film and but it wasn't like today where there were so many 3D animation schools everywhere that you could
Hmm.
really say, okay, that's what I want to learn. So when I started, I was just like, okay, after school, I wanted to do something with art and computers. So that was the big thing. And when I started, the internet was pretty big.
Hmm.
That was kind of like, okay, web design, databases, Java server pages, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And so I went to a relatively new program that was at the university in Darmstadt. And I studied something that was called media systems design, and it was basically a mix of those things like information technology and basically design. And then there was also a production management aspect to it,
Hmm.
which is interesting because at that point in time I wasn't as interested in it, but that
Hmm.
kind of came back later. And so I did that, and like in during that time I was just super excited because there were so many of those 3D and feature animation films coming out. I remember I watched Shrek like so many times, and that short for the birds. I think I really got on my on my friends' nerves by just watching this over and over again, and I was like, this is it. I love this, and this is the perfect combination for like programming and basically design and art. So I was like, okay, I want to do this. But I was like in the middle of studying what I was doing, and it was still really useful because it gave me kind of a good, really base of things that I wanted.
Hmm.
But what I wanted to do is I basically in our program we had one semester where we had to basically do an internship. And that semester, I decided, wow, I'm going to go to Hollywood. Which is
Oh.
funny because, of course, I had zero connections, nothing. So I decided, okay, what can I do? I can make a website. So I made a website. And at that point in time, there were no 3D classes in the school, actually. So I learned it at home.
Hmm.
I learned 3D. I think a lot of people did that at the beginning. So I learned 3D Studio at home. I did, I actually took like a job as like a research at a research institute, like
Hmm.
a little kind of job there, and they allowed me to learn Maya on SGI workstations, which was
Oh
so
wow.
cool. So I was doing that. It was fantastic. And so I did kind of like a little mini demo reel, even though it was horrible. Horrible. And but at that point in time, that's always what I had. And I made this website, and I got this book, like literally physical book. And I looked up all of the companies in LA and I looked up their websites, and I didn't know any of those companies. I was just like, this is great, this is great, this is great. And then I applied to all of them. I think I applied to a selection of 120 companies.
Wow. Do you
And
send physical?
no, that's the whole thing. So I sent it with I had this whole online
Oh,
application,
okay.
and then I sent it out that way. But at that point, it wasn't as common that you had this stuff all set up that way. And so I sent it out, and I knew it was a kind of a long shot. But I actually got a company, and they called me, and I was so nervous. I think I was never that was crazy. I was like sitting there, I had it all prepped on my desk with like English expressions and everything,
Oh.
And so they called me, and it was Gentle Giant Studios in Burbank, and they actually offered me this internship. And so I went to LA for, I think it was 7 months, and that was the first time I was really in it. And in there, what they were doing was basically scanning. They made 3D scans of actors, and I also scanned a lot of maquettes and objects, and that was really cool. So we did, we would take this big truck and would go on set,
Mhm.
and then my supervisor and I, and then most of the time it wasn't me because I was just learning, but once in a while I was allowed to go too, and then I would scan actors, and then later on we would take those digital scans and would edit them. That was like in 2002, so that was really still like
Wow.
something really crazy that
Yeah, it was
I had never
cutting
seen
edge
before.
back then.
Yes. Yeah.
No, no, nowadays it's a little more like common. Like everybody,
Yes.
even with the iPhone, you can do the 3D scans. I mean,
Yes.
it's not that
It
good,
was,
but
and it was pretty amazing, and it
but
was really cool. And but yeah, then after that internship, I went back to Germany, finished my studies,
Mhm.
and I decided, okay, I want to learn more, because I had really only done all of this on my own, and then of course with the company in LA. But I wanted to just say, okay, what can I do? So I decided I'm going to do my MFA, and uh, I decided to apply for a scholarship, because in Germany actually education is free. So there was no such thing as like I could like get a loan for students, at least at that point in time. So I knew it's like, if I want to study in the US and I want to go for an MFA in that area, I need to get some financing. So I applied for a Fulbright scholarship. I was really lucky, got that, and then I came to New York and studied at the School of Visual Arts,
Mhm.
and that was super great. I did my MFA there, and funny enough, at that point in time, actually, I wanted to do effects. I wanted to actually do crowd simulation,
Mhm.
which was at that point in time a little
What?
tricky
It's
because,
out of the like. How do you decide to do that? Like Lord of the
well,
Rings, maybe? But I don't
yeah,
know
there was
which
a lot
time.
of that. There was a lot of the rings in there. Why I wanted that, and then I just was fascinated by having characters and how they basically how you could use um basically emulate this kind of like flocking behavior or those kind of things in the computer, and then
Mhm.
basically make that happen with your actors. And at that point in time, the school didn't have massive, I remember I went with I actually switched to Softimage XSI,
Mhm.
and they had this little program behavior, and with its
Mhm.
own scripting language Piccolo, and I went in and I did a little crowd simulation for
Wow.
my project, which was kind of a little insane. I should probably not have done that, but it was a lot of fun, and I graduated, so it kind of works out. And after that,
Mhm.
because of my scholarship, I had to actually return to Germany, so I went back,
Mhm.
and I started applying, and one of the companies that accepted my application, and that one was really great. It was a small advertising agency, but it was known in Germany for making 3D character commercials.
Mhm.
And basically, they had those. I'm sure if you've seen, but the Jägermeister, like those beer and all of
Oh,
that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a while back. We did a lot of Kinder Surprise, the little eggs with
Which
the
one was the company? Me-
it was called Spans and Partner.
Oh, yeah.
It was very small, very small. In Hamburg, there were I don't know, maybe 15. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly,
But
but the small little company, and it was great because the people, they were also nice, and we really got some awesome things done. But the funny thing is, and now here's my point. I really wanted to do simulation, and I was basically the TD there. So I did a lot of different things. But one of the things I learned there, and that was really from my predecessor there. He basically taught me really in depth how to rig, and I had learned it at school. But I think that was the first time I was like, oh, I get it. That was like literally, I got it. And it's funny because I was doing also simulation, and I was sitting there, doing a real floor simulation. I was just, how it goes, at least, especially at that time, you do it, you wait, and you do
yeah.
one, and it's still not right, and you wait, and the same thing again. And I'm sorry, that soul is falling out. I was probably not quite patient enough. And so I, like, when doing rigging, you have this first, the perfect mix of tech
Mhm.
and art, and then you also it's instant, you don't have to
Yeah.
wait until you see if it works,
Yes.
most of the time. So I really enjoyed that, and so that's how I got into that. And then 3 years later, I saw that Blue Sky Studios had an opening, and as a character TD, and that's when I applied, and I was really lucky. Another one of those interviews where I was extremely nervous, and I got the job, and was also lucky to get a visa because that was quite difficult.
Mm.
But then I got it, and I since then, basically, that was 12 years ago now, almost.
Mm.
Yeah, no, it was 12 years ago. And yeah, started then at Blue Sky Studios in the rigging department.
Wow. That's I mean, that's super cool. You had the chance to go back and forward, and you knew very clearly from the beginning, I want to do this, and I'm just gonna look my path, but I want to do Hollywood style. Like that's something I wish like in my experience, like I'd never had this unless at the beginning, this, I don't know how to say, like this energy to go out to Spain at the beginning. It was more like, yeah, in Spain, here, whatever is around here, I will do it. And some friends, they did. I have some ex colleagues that they went to Blue Sky
Oh
animators,
yeah.
and I did. I mean, I started like more as an animator, and I remember they were the first. I think um when this how it's called, animation mentor started. I think they
Oh
they
yes.
were
Yeah.
the first batch on that,
Yes.
and I they were like super good compared to me. I was like a zero, like horrible animator. I don't know how I get the job, and I went more like a technical stuff. I took care of the motion capture there. Like was really like old style magnetic thing, like really like you need to reset every 15 minutes the
Yeah.
machine and calibrate again. And but yeah, they were, I mean, really clear. I want to go to big movies, I want to go to the States, and they had this very clear minded set. And when they told me how much cost like animation mentor first batch, I was like, see, this is.
Yeah.
And back in Spain, that was the salary of 1 year, maybe complete full salary of 1 year for us, like to kind of thing. Unless mine, maybe they they get more, but I don't know. But and they but they did it. They did this animation mentor. They get super good, they went to one movie that I think in Spain they called Planet 51, and from Planet
Mhm.
51 they jump. I think it was Blue Sky. Them.
Yeah, I remember this. There were also a lot of people that were teaching from Blue Sky, I believe, at Animation Mentor. I think I was actually at that point I was always a little jealous because I didn't know anything that was in the rigging area, and I was a horrible animator. That's what I learned. I was not good at this. I could not do this to the level that was required to go to, to work at the big movies. But yeah, it was now it's different. But I remember back then, I always wanted something that is like for rigging in that area where you can do that, like a rigging mentor. But now it's different, and I'm glad that a lot of those online places are now doing that as well.
Yeah, I think well back then it was not a thing being a rigger. You were an
No,
animator or 3D generalist. Sheesh, kind of.
that's
Uh,
very true. I think though that was the funny thing. Like in Germany, it was totally the same thing. Like you kind of were more generalist, and that's why at my studio there, I was also just doing a whole
mm,
bunch of different things. But I remember at Blue Sky, I was already kind of like, okay, rigging 2D. That was the
mm.
description. I mean, I was kind of lucky that this was really where I felt like I had found what I wanted to do.
That's interesting. The so you so it was something you didn't look for, but when you find it on your path, you click for you really strong and say, okay, this is my call. Here,
Yes.
I'm here to stay.
Yes, I think also when I started at Blue Sky, the that it was a very special studio. It's a very tight
Hmm.
knit group, but still somehow it had somehow this family feeling,
Hmm.
so that it was really really nice, even though it was a big company, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, it was really cool. And I remember I started on Rio 2, no, not true, Rio 1. I started on Rio 1, and I was really cool because it was my first movie. But I got actually, I mean, it wasn't one of the bird lead characters at that point in time, but I got the smuggler main bad guy from the
Hmm.
humans, and that was so cool, and I loved it. I was so excited. The animator I worked with at that time, um, she was it was just such a fun time, to work together, figure it out. I always loved working really closely with the animators because they are basically the ones that have to use it later, right? So I just love to see from their perspective what they are looking
Hmm.
for, and then make sure that I can capture that and get that to them in a hopefully user friendly way. And that was pretty much how I started out. And then on when was that? I think on Epic, I became a lead
Hmm.
for the face. No, that's not true. That's not true. I became a face lead on Rio 2,
Hmm.
but on Epic, I actually dove into working on my own little uh, character. We call it like component, but basically it's like we have modules that make our character rigs. So I
Hmm.
dove in and I had this character. It's like a caterpillar. It has like 6 arms and 4 legs and had to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And I remember at that point that was the first time I was really going in and like making my own scripts, making my own modules, and adjusting some of those existing ones. And that was really cool. And then on Rio 2, then I became a face lead, which was really cool. And also it was an interesting time because we basically had to re-rig all of our characters because we had just changed our rigging system
Oh.
completely. So at that point in time, we switched very much to using a almost purely blend shape based face rig. So we went in and decided, it was kind of this big decision. Are we going to use the older assets, or are we just going to go in and re-rig them? And we decided actually to re-rig them, which I think was a good decision because we were actually relatively fast
Hmm.
because we already had the art direction, and that's often the really lengthy
Yeah.
part to really figure
Yeah.
out what are the characters like, how do
Yeah.
these rigs work, how do they function. So that was really cool. So
Yeah,
we basically
the
remake them all.
iteration, it's always a big part of this, especially when, yeah, a lot of, yeah, we can talk maybe later about that, but yeah, back and forward to
Yes.
nail the characters, it's
Yeah.
it's a long process.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think my favorite movie that I've worked on is still, I would say, I mean, the movie that we were just working on, the Mona, is definitely one of my big favorites. But the one that really is like stands out clearly is the Peanuts movie.
Mm.
I I I loved working on it. I mean, it was such a huge challenge at that
Mm.
time, and I was at that point they started to introduce show leads, so I became the first rigging show lead on that show, which
Mm-hmm.
was really cool. So I was responsible for like figuring out how we do this, of course, with the rigging supervisor at that point, and I was really like really hands on going in. I did most of the like sliding stuff from the
Mm-hmm.
faces. And it was really cool because everybody had to come up with all of those really crazy new
Mm-hmm.
ideas. The whole rigging team was like
Yeah.
just like working. How can we figure this out? And that was super exciting. I really enjoyed that because all of this. To basically create something that looks more like pen strokes,
Yeah.
that was a huge challenge. And I just remember this to be one of those big efforts that everybody wanted to make it look perfect and as good as we could from a standpoint of being true to what the original creator Charles
Mm-hmm.
Schulz had
Mm-hmm.
imagined and had created with before. So we wanted to all make sure that this is correct, and so that's why everybody was also so incredibly motivated to work on this, and it was just a great environment. I loved that, and during that time, I actually I worked very close with animation as well. And what was interesting, so animation had this role that was actually in animation, and it was called the character development supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
So the character development supervisor at Blue Square was normally somebody from animation that was technical.
Mm-hmm.
And this was but that person left, a dear friend of mine, and he basically left, this role open. And on Peanuts, they were, I was offered that role
Mm-hmm.
to basically take over, and it was really exciting because this role was something interesting. It was kind of in between animation and rigging.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also really, I was super honored because normally it was, taken by an animator. And at that point, animation asked me, who came from the rigging department. And I
Mm-hmm.
was definitely thinking, oh, wow, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So that there was a really good trust relationship. And that was that was kind of my next big step, character development supervisor, which was really working on characters from a standpoint of at the beginning, working with modeling and animation and making sure that the faces were could perform, that they were modeled in a way that we could make sure that we get the appeal out of it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of really, we were doing tests like, hey, how does it work with the proportions? Is this all working out? Expression tests and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I think, really, really great. But it always was interesting, and I get to that later because it always felt like a little bit maybe in the wrong spot from a pipeline standpoint, because
Mm-hmm.
the modelers basically had already something created, and it was more like, let's maybe work even earlier, with the modelers together to kind of take a little bit
Mm-hmm.
out of that But I'll get to this a little bit later when we talk about my next role at Blue Sky. But in that role, what was really, really interesting was really strengthening that relationship between animation and rigging, and figuring out what does animation look for, what would they like to have, how do we want to use it, how does their animation style work, and how does that affect what they would like to get out of the rigs. And then working with rigging and rigging supervisor, making sure that we had everything, that we were maybe brainstorming some ideas and techniques. How can we do this? How can we achieve that? Do we maybe have to make some compromises, with the animators, because not everything is always possible in the budget, as we all know. So that was also part of what I would do. I would make sure that we find a good middle ground if that was the case. And yeah, it was an interesting position because, and you probably also know how that sometimes goes. Then animation is like, I want this, and why are they not doing this? And then from a rigging standpoint, it's like, whoa, we're giving them all of this, and then they're not really using this. So there's a lot of that sometimes.
Yeah,
So,
well,
and it's fun because in a lot of ways everybody just wants to do their very best and give their very best.
yeah.
And at least that was my experience. So I was always like telling everybody, it's like, everybody wants to do the best, and you just have to also look at from the animator's perspective or from the rigger's perspective, and they are working on this, they're trying this to do, and then test this. What do you think about that? And so I felt like there was a lot of that as well, and that's where I'm like kind of feel like some of that management part kind of crept in to kind of make sure we're all working in a good and collaborative way. But I think it actually was really, really awesome. I enjoyed that time very much together with rigging and animation.
I'm curious, like for me it's like yeah, what you say, like to reach into compromises in I think there's a lot of level of compromises. It's like sometimes it's like features compromises, sometimes it's like even you can put a lot of like automatizations or getting some fine deformation so you avoid some stuff, but at the end it's a very slow asset and it's hard to work with. Sometimes it's the time itself, you cannot iterate. I mean, for me it's, I don't know if for you, but I don't know, out of, I see a character, I don't know how to rig it out of the like as first glance on the, I mean, you have experience, you have some ways to reach the points, but in many situations, especially when it's a new challenge, I think it's a lot of try and error.
Yeah, it's an exploration.
And, exploration.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think you're absolutely right. There are so many different things from a standpoint of finding a compromise, and sometimes it can also not be done from a budget standpoint. If there's something specific, and that's sometimes everybody's like, oh, we wish we could do it, but it doesn't quite work out. But I think what was really fantastic was like just those iterations, making those easier between rigging and between animation, making sure, and of course the other departments, but at that point that was primarily those two, and making sure that we get the best for out of the characters for the time given, and making sure that the quality is high, and that later on the animators are also kind of able to move it and it's not super,
it's not like a real flow simulation that you can do something else
the Peanuts characters were incredibly slow. It was so slow because we didn't have time to optimize.
Sorry, which one?
The Peanuts characters were incredibly slow, and it was that was unfortunate. But there were so many new things in there to achieve the look. We just like ran out of time to really optimize it all, and the only saving grace was that it was animated on twos.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to spline, and I think, although I'm not sure, we'll maybe if you interview an animator at some point,
like the other side, the face of the coin. Like, no, it's not that. It's not this kind of podcast where I. Maybe,
but I think it was good, and we learned a lot from it, and also it's actually interesting because I can tell you a little bit later about how we learned from it, and then adjusted our approach for Nimona for something really similar. So that's something interesting.
Yeah, and I can imagine, like I had recently the chance to watch the movie. I didn't have the chance to watch it on theaters, but now it's in Disney Plus, and I watched it with my kids the other day, and it was like I was really like like, wow, that's super cool how you transition all these three quarters, frontal and side views, and how I will say, how respectful is for the original art, I will
Yeah.
say. And that's amazing. I was thinking, like, as a rigger, like, ouch, how you do that. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like something I will like to I mean, it will be nice to have the challenge, but at the same time it's like, maybe maybe small piece, not a big movie.
It was definitely like when we looked at it, we were like, "Oh my god, how are we gonna do this?" You know. And the interesting thing is, though, and that's where I'm kind of getting back to that kind of family vibe as well, because I literally I met with the I think it was that the I think the associate producer at that point every day to make sure that I give them update, because one of the things, the only way this would work was I basically like always met every day and said, we have to finish this one character, Charlie Brown, first.
Mhm.
We can do Snoopy and Woodstock at the same time, but the humans, the kids, will do this one character, we'll do Charlie Brown, and then from that we can create all of the other
Mhm.
kids fast.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we will not be able to finish this. And but it was a huge leap of faith, because the production management is like, oh, you're working on this one character for ages.
Yeah, yeah.
And then but it worked out, and then the other characters we could really create relatively fast. But as you
Mhm.
said, yeah, it was
Mhm.
definitely a lot of challenges, and we had those character views, for those
Mhm.
3/4 front profile, and we literally had to move facial features
Mhm.
around to hit that exact
Mhm.
profile view, for example, that Charles Schulz had drawn. So
Mhm.
that was pretty insane. And I always like, I can't believe what the animators did with those rigs. I'm always astonished when I see the result. There was just one, well, there was this one test where I basically did a test. I gave them
Mhm.
those like crease lines, we called them,
Mhm.
and they were supposed to be crease lines in the face, and and then one of the animators did this test, and it's literally used for all kinds of stuff, for lip lines, for like everything you could imagine. And the funny thing is, you would just, if you would rotate the character just a little bit, it would all fall apart,
Mhm.
because you could see this was just lines and 3D
Mhm.
lines in space. And yeah, it was really interesting. I'm That's what I really like about this relationship between rigging and animation, because we create awesome uh, things, but then when they take it, sometimes I look at it, it's like, how did they even do this with
Yeah.
what, like, I gave them, or somebody on the team gave them.
I
So
feel the
it's
same.
like,
I think sometimes I know by a fact, like, oh, horrible rig. Well, you can find excuse like I didn't have the time, and many things can happen and so on. And the thing is, like, when I see the final result, wow, you can do that with my rig. First news. And the other thing is, like, depending also the animator that it's I I I sometimes I feel like, depending of the team or the animators, or the supervisor that I work with, the quality of the output of my work, it's better or a little weaker, depending of with who I work. And it's like
yes,
something that it represents, like it's a huge, like, teamwork what is happening there. It's not like, yeah, you need to balance this. Like, it's not only rigger does amazing, it's no animator feedback the
yeah,
rigger, and it's a loop that creates
yeah,
something great. If it's you don't have this, it's, I mean, you can do awesome rigs, of course, and you can do awesome animations with awesome rigs, but if you have this synergy, I think that's where the
yes,
magic happen, if you can say that.
absolutely. I totally agree. And that's maybe going to my like basically the role that I was holding when I just before the studio closed. But the cool thing was that exactly that was something I wanted to get kind of more tight. And one of the things is I became really interested in collaboration, in the 3D animation feature film, and I like I don't know when that was, like 7 years ago or so. I actually decided, okay, I want to really do research in that area. So I'm not sure you knew, but I basically went back to school like on the side, and I
Mhm.
did my like a research in that area. And I got my PhD in it, and it was really like
Oh,
kind
you
of,
didn't
it was
find time
fun.
for that?
It was, I did it all on the weekends and after work. It was a really stressful time, but what's cool about it, I never would have thought that what I actually like, it was based on a lot of interviews from the industry. And I never would have thought that what I learned there, from how people, collaborate and like
Mhm.
to work, and what are those kind of things that really make it hard, all of those things. Like, just to confirm them in my study. And then I got this amazing opportunity because I was hired as got, basically the role of head of characters a couple of years back. And as part of that role, uh, me and one of my colleagues in environments, we got the opportunity to kind of restructure the way we work.
Mhm.
And that was super amazing. I would have never thought that also kind of what I kind of was doing on the side, that this actually would have any sort of like application in what I was doing in my job. So that was a positive surprise, but it was really cool.
But yeah, I mean, if someone is listening, I will advise that. I mean, normally what you do in your side hustles is normally what you, and it's, you have a high probability. I mean, of course, if it's related, no, if you go for, I don't know, sailing, maybe, unless there's a movie of ships, I don't know. But
That's right. You may do research, yeah.
yeah, but there is like, it's very important, your personal projects, your side project, whatever is it, it's very important. I think if you don't, oh, I mean, obviously, if you are happy in where you are and you want to stay forever there, it's all good. I mean, there is nothing wrong with that. But if you want to evolve, or to achieve something that maybe it's an evolution of what you're doing, yeah, it's the, I will say it's the only way to do it. It's like, probably, to do some side thing that give you the opportunity, or creates the opportunity, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just sometimes it's so surprising because I really didn't plan for any of that, and then it just like, it's
Mm.
like it just popped up as like an opportunity, and that was super cool. So what was really awesome is that I then got the opportunity to basically um, change it a little bit, how we were structured from a standpoint of, we were all individual departments, like modeling, rigging. The costumes artists were actually in character simulation, which totally makes sense as well. But it was, three different departments, and we had fur as a different department, and we had materials as a different department. And one of the things, and I wasn't didn't know if that would work or if it was the right approach, but basically one of the things that I had personally learned from previous experiences is that sometimes there was like a disconnect between those departments from
Mhm.
the standpoint of that, they were more sequential, there was more of a waiting pattern. Of course, also, because you weren't looking so much at the character holistically. So I was trying something a little different. And so we created this characters department and the environments department that was basically spearheaded by one of my colleagues. And so the characters department then had those disciplines in it. It was like we had like 50 artists working in all of those different disciplines. And we basically, and that's actually something we were just really going full in on, was having little character squads. Then, and we basically voted on the name. So
Karate
it's kind
squad.
of like a little pod,
Hmm.
but we call it the character squad. And it was basically the idea was to have an artist from every discipline in it, and basically together work on a character more holistically. And one of the things was okay. There were definitely some things we had to figure out. Like, for example, we might not immediately get a fur artist or a materials artist right away. But that was the idea, that we would have a character and then those people would work on it. And we also added in the animator, like the animation supervisor at the beginning, but then later we wanted the animator who actually works on the character. And also the designer would work very closely with this group. And what was really cool is, at least what I felt happening is, that it became like a little group where, like, for example, the modeler and the rigger, they were like just really talking very closely. You would have the animator immediately test it. Also, we changed the technology a little bit to the degree that, we could now install really fast our rigs. That was something really new that we couldn't do before. And then we had this really fast, and then there was this little like feedback loop, and the costumes artists could go in right away, put their first garment rough draft on it, and test out how it would work. Does it look good? Is it what the director wants? And the animator could take it and could do a walk cycle test, and then we would figure out, do the proportions work? Does this look good? Can we achieve everything? Can the character sit?
Yes.
Just like simple things. But and that was really, I mean, I hope my team feels the same, but I felt that was very, very successful. And I get feedback from people that they liked this way of working because it allowed them to really iterate quickly, go back and forth, and maybe, in some ways, maybe at some later point we would have been faster. Maybe we were already fast. I'm not 100% sure. We were still like figuring all out, but I would say that the iterations were much faster, so you could iterate more. And I think that already helped like increase the quality right from the get-go.
And you said you also in the team was like a designer, so it was like a real iteration, like from, it's not like the character design is this, and from there you need to do the final asset for animation. It was more like it can go back and adjust the design to help the animation, or to help the story, or to help certain limitations that you may hit on maybe to the animation, or sorry, to the design. But I think also like Blue Sky was really big on doing maquettes and physical assets, no, like to process. That was also involved on that process.
We definitely did. We used to do a lot of maquettes, and we were still doing some ZBrush maquettes. We were also we had one excellent sculptor doing the actual the clay maquettes, really, really cool. But we, in this specific process, that was kind of the new one we were doing, was just like really all working together. But you are right, we had the designer in there and helping us to figure out things as we went. But it did have an initial design, and that was also really good because that design was approved. That was something that the director wanted. However, when there were things that, for example, didn't 100% turn, how it sometimes goes, and you have a front and a side and a profile drawing, but it doesn't really come together, then you make adjustments. Or we had one character that animation found was extremely difficult to pose in some areas. Like literally that person, that kid, it was really difficult from a seating standpoint, and he looked much, much younger. So there were then adjustments made to those proportions, and we went together in this. That was really cool because design was, always we always kept them in the loop, and they were often in those conversations anyway. So we would work then together. They would maybe do some adjustments, and then we would get that approved from the director and show us how we got there really quickly. And then we were all on the same page and would keep iterating on it. And I think that was nice because sometimes in the past we would do something, and then later on we would get a rig, much later, and then the rig would be basically coming on when the model's already final. And that was sometimes challenging because it doesn't always work exactly the way you want it to. And there are just adjustments that are being made on the way. And in that sense, I think this model, at least from our beginning standpoint, it seemed successful in achieving that goal. That also people felt like it was a little bit more their character. That was really cool too. I
Mhm.
loved one of the groups took, and this was through all the disciplines from a squad. They took like we had an event and they took a photo together. So that was across all the disciplines, and they all took a photo together. Like we are this character's squad, and it became like a little fun group that they basically said this is our character, that we are making.
That's
So
super
I
cool.
thought that was something really cool there.
Yeah, and yeah, I think yeah, the key is always like this iteration to make something quality, and if you can help this iteration, it's
Yeah.
when it's more smooth. I think yeah, that's important to have, and sometimes I mean it depends. Projects you have this like you can do it more or less, but always it's
Yeah.
important to have a little bit, even if it's just a
Yes.
few cycles to brush up stuff and go like for a more refined. So I'm very curious, like so you did this rearrangement, so you and how many, I mean, was like different squads, like maybe 5, 10 squad, I don't know how many. It was a lot, no,
Yes.
squads, I guess.
So it I think it was especially we normally don't start with like all the characters at once.
Mm,
So often, like at least on the last one, I can say we basically started out with the two lead characters,
mm-hmm,
and then we would have uh, a group of people that was early on the show. And the way we did it was because we actually didn't have that many people available. We would have people that would do double duty.
uh-huh,
So, for example, our costumes artist would be doing double duty on both of those. And that also lined up nicely because, they're never going purely in parallel. The
mm-hmm,
characters, there's always a little bit of that. So we had some of that happening. But yeah, the idea was then later we would continue doing those little squads with different people. But for that specific project, we only got to like the first lead characters, and that's how we arranged it. So and that group was very tight knit. We had a lot of those meetings, together as well, just
mm-hmm,
to be, especially at the beginning, to be on the same page of how we want to do things, and also make sure that um, I think the modelers know what rigging needs, right?
mm-hmm.
So that there is that communication going on, and that rigging knows what the modelers are basically
Mm-hmm.
testing out and dealing with. So that was a really good, I think, connection there.
That's I'm yeah, I wanted to ask you a few questions, but you explained so well that it's already replied before I can ask it. So that's not fair. Yes. But yeah,
That's
that's I mean
awesome.
it's super. I found that the way that you explained and how it was working, it was super ideal, at least for my point of view. That you can do that, and yeah, I always think like this kind of squads, and even and maybe this is a little out of the scope of the conversation, but even at the beginning of a project, if you have this like kickstart project squad that does a
Yeah.
little test like years and
Yes.
ahead with a small team, like you say, one designer, one maybe
Yeah.
the director or something, and you can provide sometimes like this little like maybe not teaser, but proof of
Yeah.
concept something, and only doing that and then going for full production with this done
Yeah.
ahead. I think it's also like a big, because you already did a mini test, like mini
Yeah.
iteration. I do
Yeah,
you
it's
have
like a look dev test, right? You have your look dev team in some ways, that,
mhm,
but not only from the actual like materials and first standpoint, but together with also keeping the
mm,
performance
mhm,
and the actual
yeah,
character as a whole in mind. Yes,
yeah,
totally. I think that was really something I thought worked very well, but and I think people had fun doing it, but I guess that's I hope at least.
yeah. Well, I think, well, you never for sure, but I'm pretty sure that's much more fun to work than more like I will say standard, not standard, I don't know, because that be the
It's probably
standard,
more
but more
maybe
classic.
more linear. Yeah,
Yeah,
more linear in
linear
some ways,
factory
right?
way
Yeah,
of do the things there, where
yeah,
when you reach to one point, it's super hard to go back because there's so many steps, and it maybe has passed even months from
yeah,
like when you receive your asset for rigging, maybe was finished. Well, not always the case, but maybe
yeah,
it was finished long ago, and the model is doing all this stuff, and
yeah.
just get that one, and there's something that you need to change. It's kind of a it's, I would say, not problematic, but costly, less like.
Yes, no, absolutely. And it's interesting. I think a lot of this, because part of my job was also to just keep an overview over the technical development in the department. Of course, my specialty is more based on rigging, and but I had an excellent rigging development supervisor, Ferris Webby, and he we worked on figuring this out for the rigging. And then I had also experts in the other disciplines that knew, like more about the materials and the fur workflow,
Mhm,
just to make sure that we would get our department got,
mhm,
the development resources, and also had a good like overall outline of how we want to move forward. And that was really something where a lot of those things kind of went into it. Like, for example, just talking about our BG characters, I would
mhm,
say. So for Nimona, the project we were working on, that was extremely, we wanted to really make sure that we get a diverse crowd, that our BG characters, our world is diverse. We have different people, like
mhm,
just a really, you know, all as colorful as you can have it.
mhm,
And that was going all the way through all sizes,
mhm,
everything you could imagine. And we were never really, in the past, it took us very long to make those background characters
mhm,
in a lot of ways. And there were some earlier projects where we really did have to, you know, it was kind of pretty sparse, so you would
mhm.
sometimes even recognize somebody in the background that you had seen before.
Okay, we
and
check the previous movies, like,
yeah,
eh,
and so when we did this on Spice, we started, thinking about, okay, how can we make a generator and so on. But then on Spice, the generator we had, and the one we started on we used on the Mona, was basically we used, like the rig to make the shape of the character. So basically,
mm,
right, you had a
yes.
rigged model, and then you would use the rig to create your new shape.
Mhm,
So one of the things we changed or were about to change for the future was that this process actually took long, and the problem was that it was not very intuitive. So really only a rigger could do it, that was really
mm,
like in tune with it. And so what we decided is, instead of doing that, we're going to do it the other way around. We're going to have a modeler or a rigger, because we have a lot of crossover from a
mhm,
standpoint of talent there. But let's say the modeler would model the BG characters, basically crank them out, and then we would be able to have the rig move into place.
mhm,
And that was kind of the opposite approach. And of course, for that, we had to introduce a universal topology, which we
mhm,
didn't have before. So those were all steps that we made in order to be more efficient, but also getting more out of this. And
mhm,
in a lot of ways, we were also, looking at this from not only like one standpoint, like from a rigging discipline standpoint, but also from the
mhm,
modeling. So how can we make this easier and better
mhm,
for them? So we had, at the end, we had a system where you could then, with like, well, maybe not quite one button click, but pretty close to it,
mhm,
create a rig on it, right? When they were just modeling. So we did early tests on this. So we integrated that. And then this went further. We had to think about for Nimona, how would we want to do costumes. And I mean, this is definitely something that has also been done by, you know, the character simulation department and the supervisor from simulation, just figuring out how can we efficient, and that they developed something like a smart garment where you would have a you know, a shirt that could be multiple things. You know, it could be long sleeves, short sleeves, and so all of this made it into this basic character generator, and that went all the way through to new techniques for materials. How can we have patterns that are procedural? How do we make recipes for all of those characters, and how do we have picked from our basically hairdos and have this very modular? And that went then all to crowds, where then the crowds department and the supervisor there were really figuring out how can we bring this all together and have recipes that we make. And it was a really huge collaborative project, and it was awesome because it wasn't just, you know, my department, it was all the other departments that chimed in, and we were all working together on making something that is gives us the quality, the diversity we needed, and also some of that efficiency. And of course, that was always is kind of a work in progress. Right? It doesn't immediately happen on the first try, but it was just great from a standpoint of making sure that, you know, we look at this a little bit more from a standpoint of how would this help at every stage, and how could we make something later that just gives us what we need for the movies and have them as high quality as we can.
That the thing is, like what you're saying, like you have these all departments working, and you think not only from the modeling and how the forms, but also the like shading, and also like when it goes to crowds and background characters, and how you, because the crowds characters, I mean, it's not like it can be a background character, but it can be full like animatable because it's maybe, but also you have the crowd characters, and maybe it's a turned down watered down like version of the characters, like maybe it's less topology, maybe it's less geometry, or don't have so much of complexity because you need to run thousands of these units on the crowd simulation. So instead of working that this is crowd sims and they work like independent and this is like hero characters a squad that does these amazing characters, and was all together, and everybody was thinking, or you in this case was I mean, overwatching everything to ensure that you can move data easily, or it's the less friction between the different departments, or like...
Yes, and I definitely don't want to credit for being the one that masterpieces everything. Absolutely not. But what was really, really great was that in my position, what I was able to do is I was able to work with the technology department to, you know, let them know what we would need for the future and plan that out, that it would work. And then I would bring in people that might not have been on the show yet, because, you know, characters is always really like early on, you know, the start most of the time as one of the first ones after, you know, the designs are done for characters. And then I was like just pinging, you know, our crowd supervisor, and I said, you know, Mark, could you join this meeting or send somebody? You know, I need your input here, and we will have to figure out what we think would be best, you know, the best to do for this, just so we don't decide something at the beginning that, you know, basically screws you up later. Or bringing in you know, the character sim soup, or ask them, hey, can you send somebody from your team, you know, so we don't make something that is not usable for you later. So that was part of that as well, just making sure that we had, even though people might not have been on the show, that you would get an expert in that could help inform this process, so we wouldn't really you know, do something that then hurts somebody later, or it makes it easy for us, but then it makes it really hard for the later departments. I think that was always something I felt like was super important, because we all work together on this, and we want to make the best result. And sometimes sometimes I don't know what makes you know, what might be not so good for character 7, right? And
Mhm.
then they are there and they can help inform that decision. And that, I think, was also something that I felt was relatively successful, that we had this this expert input really early on, even at places when they were not even really on the show
Uh,
yet.
yeah, that's yeah. I no, I cannot agree more on that. Like it's because we work in a, I mean, our medium, it's a collaborative medium, and it's a, I mean, when we, I mean, the projects, even like a modest size, I would say there's a lot of people doing that. It's not like only it's something that it's, oh, okay, it's only Blue Skies, Disney, DreamWorks, and Pixar's of the world.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of studios that are modest, and we face the same challenges on these areas, because the
Yes.
pipeline is still like, we maybe it's smallish, but we're talking about hundreds of
Yeah.
people working on the project. It's quotes there small.
Yes.
It's relative, no? But the but yeah, to having something that you take decisions at the beginning of the process, and then you compromise the decision making of someone at the end, or even at the middle of the process. Like I did this, and
Yeah.
then you arrive like 6 months later, and you need to do, I don't know, effects, for instance, or crowds, or, and then you realize, oh, sorry, I cannot tear down this character because there is no
Yes.
body inside to
Yeah,
things like that.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
for instance,
And I exactly, and it definitely was something, I would say we definitely learned from our mistakes, because I mean, I would say it's never bulletproof, but at least
mm,
you can try to avoid as much as possible.
mm,
And I think that is also, it's a I always felt like it was a really good way to work, because it just helps to solve the problems before they even really come up in some ways.
mm.
So I think that is in the ideal, at least. I mean, it doesn't always work out, but I think it definitely helps that way of working. And I think it also is more enjoyable, because then there are no bad surprises later.
Yeah, and I feel like, from also from standpoint of team member, like, point of view, because it feels more collaborative. I think it's more rewarding,
Yeah.
because you are part of this decision making process.
Yeah.
It's not like you are sitting on your desk and just process data, or like if it was like a factory that brainless process that you don't thought. I mean,
Exactly.
you don't think twice. I mean, someone do this, and you boom, do this, and do the next, and then you see an error, or do you see something, or do you see some oh, it's not my task to oh, the design, it's have this flaw here, or uh I don't know, this character cannot touch his nose, but not my problem, and they design like this, and I'm not gonna, because I'm, so these kind of things, yeah, I think the people feels more part of this process, and obviously if they see something like that, they will uh participate, and
Yes.
give input.
Yeah. And I really, really like this way of working. And I think that's how I understand you know, supervision as well. I see it more as like facilitating the artists to take, more of that, ownership over those things,
Yeah.
and make and help make those decisions. And I'm primarily kind of stepping in when there are like two solutions and both might be good. So which one are we gonna take? And then I said,
Yeah.
this sounds maybe good. Maybe let's try this one first. But I think it's really what I really like, and that's my favorite, when I can see those groups work well, and the people figure it out together as a collaboration, and that I think, as you said, you don't feel like so much as like just executing. You're part of the process, and you're
Mm.
part of the journey to finish this up together.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's the best way to work. If you
Yeah.
can get it, it's it's the most, I will say, the most satisfactory for everybody. I will,
Yeah.
and probably the product or the final project will show that satisfaction. Let's
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
that's amazing. um Sabina, I think we hit 1 hour, a little longer. I hate to say that I have to finish the conversation because
Yeah.
I had to start working today, but I would love to continue talking with you much longer. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for everything that you explained today. I think there's a lot of I learned today, and for sure I'm gonna be showing this episode to my colleagues also. Like, look, but
Awesome.
it's
Thank you so much. I mean, this was really fun, and yeah, I hope we do this again sometime.
thank you so much, Sabina. Have a nice day or good night there.
Yeah, thank you. All right, bye.